Good morning, crypto Twitter, it's Misty Crypto, spreading crypto with doctors showing its benefits to my generation. Shout out to all my people, Gen Z needs to be included, it's really that simple. We are savage, amazed, boss SD, making money at the same time, spread peace. I feel empty if you don't include Gen Z, about to change the world, so y'all better get ready. Misty Crypto, I'm never backing down, I got a wax account, you should check it out. So many NFTs, I think I lost count, and I'm only getting started. Yeah, I'm barely off the ground. Misty Crypto, you cannot stop me. My hands are made from diamonds, your hands fall like origami. Never be the boss of me. Bitcoin's all I need. When I say I'm sassy, that's just me talking all the crypto and yum farm marketplace. I wanna see the more we gotta go through cyberspace. Leave this world without a trace. Stay faith for a different day, 'cause we partners in the cryptos didn't stay.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Miss Teen Crypto Show. I hope everybody's having a lovely Tuesday. As always, before we jump in the show, if you're new to the channel, what's up? My name is Randy, also known as Miss Teen Crypto. It's nice to meet you. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share out this stream with friends because we are in a good mood. Thank you to everyone in the chat that popped out today. As always, I'm going to say thank you to our awesome sponsor, Wax Blockchain. They're absolutely killing the game. And I'm going to waste absolutely no time today because we have a really cool guy on the show. And ironically, his name is Guy Adami. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Randy, how are you? Honored to be here. You're doing great work.
Thank you so much. I love your attitude. I love that you're like such a New York guy. Whenever you're on CNBC, you're always like telling people what's up. Never are you not yourself. And I really commend you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. I tell people all the time, you have to be yourself because everyone else has already been taken. And I think in our world specifically, people try to always prove how smart they are, try to do something they can't do. And that's sustainable for a day, a week, maybe a couple of weeks, but in the long run, it's unsustainable. So you're either going to succeed or fail being yourself. And quite frankly, that's the way it should be.
Absolutely. I think it's either you have to be yourself or you're just kind of putting out like this facade and you're just going to get caught in that anyway. And you just have to pretend to be someone you're not. I think that's too much work. So I absolutely love your perspective. And I like your perspective on a lot of things. But I want to jump back. I want to learn more about you and about who Guy was before CNBC. Do you mind telling us about who you were in college, what you thought you were going to do with your life?
So I graduated from college. This is going to be hard for your viewers to believe, but 1986. So that's 36 years ago I got out of school. Georgetown, I graduated. So I grew up in the shadow of Wall Street in Westchester County, probably 35 miles north of New York City, a town called Croton on the Hudson. Both my parents were attorneys. As a matter of fact, they met the first day of law school in 1960. And around my winter break senior year, so it's November-ish, December, this is now 1981. They were representing a guy that had gone to work at Drexel Burnham Lambert. He was an energy trader, and he was suing his previous company for a bonus that he thought he got rooked out of. So during the conversations, my parents mentioned that Dale English is his name. Our son's a senior at Georgetown. He doesn't know what he wants to do. So Dale said, have him come in over Christmas break and sit on the desk. So that's exactly what I did. So over the course of a week, in December of, again, 1981, I went down to 60 Broad Street, sat on the end of a commodities trading desk. Nobody spoke to me the entire week. On Friday of that week, and I'll spare you the vernacular, but somebody came up and said, you've been coming here all week. What the blank are you doing? What do you want? And I said, well, I was told to come down, and I was hoping to get a job when I graduated. He said, okay, when do you graduate? I said, in May. He said, well, come back after you graduate and you got a job. That's how easy it was to get a job on Wall Street back then, but it was equally easy to lose a job. And I will tell you, over the course of the first couple of years, I saw a lot of people hired. I saw a lot of people fired as well for some of the most ridiculous things you can imagine. So that's how I started. And, here we are some 36 years later. Did I ever think I'd be on television? Absolutely not. But if we make it to January, and I've been saying make it for the last 15 and a half, 16 years, but it'll be 16 years on Fast Money, which is really remarkable.
That's incredible. 16 years on TV. But you, right out of college, you were in the markets. Did you want to be in the markets? Was this ever something you even thought of?
Yeah, it's another great question. So, a lot of the guys that I knew, mostly guys then, so I'm not trying to be misogynistic at all, but some women wanted to work on Wall Street, and I obviously knew where it was, but I had no idea what it meant. So, to answer your question, no, I wanted a job. I knew that, and I wanted to make enough money to sort of live on my own and that type of thing. But in my wildest dreams, I didn't see a career on Wall Street, but it started then. And what I learned pretty quickly is they're always going to be, and you hear this all the time, there are always going to be people smarter than you, better looking than you, more athletic than you, but there's no excuse not to outwork the next guy or gal. And that's what I basically did. So I just put my head down each day. I would try to get to the office before everybody else. I'd leave after everybody left. And that's what I did for the first couple of years and went without a lot of acknowledgement. But I think what you learn is whether people realize it or not, or whether they acknowledge you or not, people are always watching. I tell people all the time, you're constantly interviewing for something. So you always have to put your best foot forward, and that's what I did. So as I mentioned, people came and went. I somehow stuck around, and I managed my way through a commodities trading desk and wound up at Goldman Sachs in 1996. And It's been an interesting story for sure. But I think the best advice I can give people is just put your head down and work hard and persevere. It's never going to be easy. There are no straight lines in life, but I think if you have a good attitude and if you have the wherewithal to sustain a lot of body blows, because in our world, that's what happens, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you were talking about kind of the determination you had of getting in the office early and kind of staying until everybody left. Well, a lot of people could be like, well, I'm just going to go in when I need to, leave when I got to leave. Why did you want to push yourself that hard? Why did you actually care that much, I guess? Because a lot of people don't.
Yeah, that's fine. And listen, that works for some people for sure. And I think, there's a lot of people in the world, as you heard the expression, they were born on third base and they think they hit a home run type of thing. A lot of entitled people. I was not one of those people. So, my success or failure was going to be predicated on my work ethic. So it was fine for other people to do those things. And, you learn the hard way that sometimes that's just not going to cut it. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how smart you think you are. If you don't have that work ethic and if your bosses can't rely on you, that's a problem. I'll give you a quick story. So it's probably now, I want to say 1988-ish. I was going to turn 25 years old, and I think December 18th that year was a Friday. Don't at me if I'm wrong, but if memory serves, and my boss came to me around 3:30 on that Friday and said, "What are you doing tonight?" And he rarely spoke to me, by the way. I said, "Well, Gary, I'm going out with a couple of my friends. It's my birthday today." I don't even know what made me say that. And I remember like it was yesterday. He said, "Well, happy blanking birthday, but you have to stay tonight and test the phones." And testing the phones meant testing the phone lines down to the exchanges because we were moving booths and stuff, and we had to make sure all the phone lines worked for trading on Monday. I said, absolutely no problem. Now, this is before cell phones and before all that stuff. So all my friends made it to the city that night to basically take me out to dinner and go for drinks. I never showed up.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, but, that was the life. I mean, I chose that life, right? I could have easily said, no, I can't do it, Gary. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And once again, it's one of those little tests you have to you pass or fail. And I guess in that case, I passed. Now, people will say that was a dumb thing to do. You only have how many 25th birthdays? You only have one. And the flip side of that is, well, sometimes you have to make sacrifices, and that's what I was willing to do.
Absolutely. You have to make sacrifices in order to further your success. And people may think that's crazy. People may think that's selfish at times, but I think that's what you need to do. You need to kind of choose yourself, choose your career. Another thing I was thinking about, as you were young, navigating these markets, you're like, okay, I graduated, I landed this job. What made you stay in the markets, and then move over to Goldman Sachs and make that transition there and moving higher up in this industry? Yeah,
that's a great question. So growing up, I either wanted to play football for the Giants or, play for the Yankees or something, or play for the Knicks. And obviously that wasn't going to happen, but you have those dreams, right? So for me, Wall Street, at least my Wall Street, commodities trading, that day-to-day trading, that was as close to being a professional athlete as I was ever going to get. And why is that? Well, each day was a competition. Each day there's a scorecard. Every day ends, if you won or lost, and the next day you play again. So for me, it was professional sports without the contact. And pretty quickly, I knew that this is what I was sort of meant to do. That's how I was wired. Now, it's not for everyone. I could never be an investment banker. I could never have a 6, 9, 12-month lead time on getting something done. I'm just not wired that way. The immediacy of the work and the ferocity of the environment is really sort of what hooked me. And it doesn't really exist today. I mean, the world has obviously gone digital and most things are done vis-a-vis internet and computer and those types of things. I get it. But, for those however many years when there were trading desks and there was noise and there was competition and emotion and all those things, it was as cool a work environment as I've been involved in. And it was a great place to learn, not only about markets, but about human behavior as well, which is equally important.
I really agree with that. You really have to learn how to deal with people if you're going to do business, especially kind of being your own business. Like you were kind of your own, I guess, brand moving through this industry, and you have to be able to handle yourself. I mean, what was it like with this environment? I know I've, watched The Wolf of Wall Street, and, they were like calling people and making how did that all work? And how did you feel? Like, was there adrenaline rushing through your blood, like getting these trades? Like, how is this going for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I saw that movie on a plane, and, it's a little bit different. And I'm going to say this, I'm sure this will piss people off, but, that Wolf of Wall Street character, he's probably done more harm than good in his life. And, those guys couldn't sniff Wall Street from a mile away. I mean, they were out there in Lake Success or something, basically ripping off old ladies and widows and widowies, right? So that wasn't my world, and I understand that world existed. My world was a little bit different. I mean, commodities trading, you were trading with your counterparts at other banks, and you were trading with basically central bankers and high net worth investors. It was a much different environment. So it was basically each day was just a giant poker game, right? If that makes sense. And you knew the cards you had, and more importantly, you tried to guess the cards the other guys and gals had, and you played accordingly. And there were days we made big bets and won big, and there were days we went all in and lost. But the good news about it is each day we could come back and do it again. So it was a rush for sure. I will tell you, I'm sure there's a lot of revisionist history in my words, because I know at the time it was not particularly easy to go through. I mean, I look back at it and remember how much fun it was, but it was equally daunting a job. I mean, you're amongst your friends and your peers and hundreds of people on a trading desk, but sometimes it's the loneliest place you can possibly be.
Yeah, I feel that a little bit. And how did you, feeling these times of just a lot of happiness, just being really involved and making all these phone calls, making trades, and then also getting this lonely side of the industry where you kind of feel like no one's here. How did you not get burnt out? How did you stay in the industry for this long?
Yeah, so as human beings, we're all emotional creatures, right? Something goes really well, you have a great day at work, or you get a bonus, you get a raise, you get a promotion, any of those things, and you go to the high end of the sine curve, right? The flip side is we lose a loved one, you have a shitty day at work, and you go to the other side. So life is this sine curve, and as human beings, we sort of ride that sine curve, and it makes sense, right? I mean, we're emotional creatures. That's what makes us what we are. I think somehow I didn't have that chip, and I'm not particularly emotional one way or another. I'm more of a flat line, so where most people are the sine curve, I'm sort of more flat. So on the good days, I don't get particularly excited. On the bad days, I don't get particularly depressed. And I think that's what helped me sustain, if there's a thing called longevity, I guess, that's what's helped me. I saw a lot of people, to your point, burn out because they ride that sine curve of emotions, and it's unsustainable. I mean, you can last, again, a week, a month, a year, a couple of years, but at a certain point, you're going to burn out. The people that have staying power, at least in my world, are the people that sort of took the emotional part out of the equation.
I'm with you. A lot of people trade with their emotions, which also kind of brings me to what Dan and I were talking about last week. Dan Nathan, Guy's friend, was on the show last week, and we were talking about how people kind of fall into this degeneracy, I guess you could say, both in crypto and traditional markets, where, like you were saying before, sometimes, you won big, and sometimes you put in everything and lost it all. How do you tread this line of not being a degenerate and losing everything, and just making it, I guess, a line between gambling and investing? Well,
it's a very fine line, as you know, and I think the lines really got blurred during COVID.
Yeah.
And, I think, listen, Dave Portnoy, you say what you want about him, bad guy, good guy, whatever it is, but there's a genius to him as well. And I think when sports went away, he realized pretty quickly that in order to maintain that audience that he had built, his community, they needed something to do, right? They could no longer bet on sports because there were no sports. So what was the next logical thing? And I think it dawned on him pretty quickly, wait a second, the stock market can sort of fill that gap, fill that void that professional sports going away sort of opened up. And he tapped into that. And for better or for worse, I think there's a generation of people that have found trading, investing, whatever word you want to use, vis-a-vis Dave Portnoy. Again, whether good or bad doesn't really matter. Here we are. So I think they learned good lessons, they learned bad lessons, and I think a lot of them learned things the hard way. But to answer your question, how do you sort of walk that fine line? Risk management, it's every,
Yes.
One of the great traders in my world is a guy named Mark Fisher. You may have seen him on CNBC from time to time. He's a legend in the commodities world, and he will say that he can be right. He can be correct in his thesis or his trading views 30% of the time and still make money. Now, I'll explain to you why that is in a second, but what I find really interesting on Twitter specifically is people will say to me, you're at best, you're a coin flip. And a lot of times I feel like saying, if I'm 50-50, I'm in the Hall of Fame, because 50-50 in our world, you're basically sitting on an island someplace. But I don't think people fully understand that. So you can be right a small percentage of the time, 25-30%. But if you do it correctly, if you trade correctly, if you have the right risk management tools, you're going to wind up doing okay. I think we're all born with good instincts. And I think instinctually, in terms of trading, you know when you're wrong. And I think conversely, you know when you're right. The reason we get ourselves in trouble in trading specifically is when we're wrong, we fight against it. And that's when ego takes over. That's when emotion takes over. So you fight against it. And what happens? You start to do things you shouldn't do, when the right thing to do is say, you know what, I'm wrong, I'm out, I'll live to fight another day. And when you're right and you know it, the right thing to do is not immediately take a profit. The right thing to do is start to lever up, right? And start to really play your winning hand. And that's what separates basically a good trader or just a novice trader from sort of the elite traders. And I'm not putting myself in the elite camp by any stretch, but that's how this whole thing works. If you can remove emotion, and more importantly, remove the ego aspect out of it, because you're going to be wrong and it's really hard to admit when you're wrong. But if you're able to do that, I think it opens up an entirely new world for you.
Absolutely. Wise words, great advice. I think people from all industries, no matter what you're in, can really take that. Risk management is super, super important. And people really take your advice, Guy. And I mean, people listen to you a lot. I mean, you're on CNBC for almost 16 years now. How did that start for you, being on CNBC? And how do you handle kind of just being this figure that people listen to almost every day?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, it's the old story. You have to realize it's a big responsibility. So you can have fun and you can be glib and you can try to make it accessible, but you also have to remember there are people listening to what you say, right? So there's a responsibility associated with that I don't take lightly. But I'll give you the quick sort of 30-second story to the extent that I can do it in 30 seconds. And this is a good life lesson as well, because I think you make thousands of decisions each day. What am I going to wear, eat? It's all bullshit, right? But every once in a while, you have to make a decision that will change the course of your life. And going back to instincts, you trust your instincts when when that's in front of you, right? When you're confronted with those decisions. So I had left Goldman Sachs in, I want to say 03 or so, and I went to work at a place called CIBC. And I left Goldman because for me, at least, it was clear I was not going to be a partner. I was not going to run the firm. And that's fine. You can have a decent career knowing that, but you could also use that pedigree or whatever you want to call it and lever it into a contract, which is what I did. So within the first couple months at CIBC, it was interesting. CNBC came to our trading desk, right? And they came there to film, and I apologize, the dogs are barking because there's somebody at the door. CNBC came to the trading desk to film what we call Miracle Day. And Miracle Day is done typically around, Thanksgiving-ish. It's the day that the company gives all their commissions or trading profits to different charities. So we had all these dignitaries on the floor, and it was a big event, and CNBC was there. Bertha Coombs was there with a camera person, and she was looking for people to interview. Nobody wanted to go on TV with her, so somebody said to me, Guy, would you be willing to go on with Bertha Coombs? So I did. I was on Liz Clayman's show. It went pretty well. Next day, I get a call from Liz. She said, listen, we really enjoyed that. Would you be willing to come on from time to time? So I did. For the next 9 months or so, I'd go on with Liz Clayman once a week, a couple times a month, and we developed a rapport. Along that same time frame, Jim Cramer's show started. And the woman that created his show, a woman named Susan Krakauer, was then tasked with what's the next show. So she had an idea, what's a trader, what do they look like, how do they interact, what do they do at the end of the day, and she wanted to replicate that on a television show. So over the course of about 6 months from November of 2005 to early '06, CNBC brought in about 450 or so people to screen test, interview, talk about a yet-to-be-named show. And I was one of the people they brought in, and some 17 or so years later, here I am.
Wow.
That's the story.
Insane. Crazy. So did you, like, when you were going for this screen test, were you like, oh, I could picture doing this for a really long time? Or were you just like, it's whatever. If I do it, I do. If I don't, I'll just keep going.
Another great question. So early on, they kept coming back to a certain group of people. It was myself, a guy named Tim Strazzini, who some of the folks here may remember. He was on the show for a few months, and then he left. A guy named Jeff Mackey, who you may know on Twitter. He's absolutely brilliant. And a guy named Eric Bowling. So Eric's went on to Fox, and he subsequently, I think he works on OAN or one of those networks. But I remember early on turning to Eric and saying, I think we have something here. And he looked at me quizzically, and I said, no, I'm telling you, I think we may have tapped into something. So before the show was even a show, so all through 2006, the Fast Money that you see now that's an hour each day was an 8-minute segment once or twice a week on an existing show. So we used to do this a couple times a week back in Englewood Cliffs, and it became apparent to a lot of people at the network that there was something here. And on a Thursday in September, the network called us up, all 5 of us, so the 4 panelists and Dylan Radigan, who was the host, and said, look, Larry Kudlow's going on vacation next week. So this is Thursday when they called us. So next week is Monday. And they said, we're going to give you guys, and we were all men, his time slot. So they just told us on a Thursday that the following week, instead of being on for 8 minutes once a week, we're going to be on for an hour 5 days the next week. And somehow we're able to pull it off. And by January '07, we had our own show. And again, here we are going on 16 years.
Incredible. And you've seen so much with the markets too by being on this show. You've experienced like the '08, like huge. Oh my gosh. What was that like to be on the news during '08 reporting all of this stuff? And do you see any similarities between '08 and now?
Yeah. '08, '09 was scary. And I say scary. There were days, so think about it. Our show started in '07. So a year into the show, the world starts melting down in a meaningful way. And we're not trained journalists. I'm still not a trained anything. Right? We're just traders that can talk about the market. But things were happening in real time that nobody had ever seen before. And we were tasked to talk about it at 5 o'clock each night on days where the market was going down multiple percent. You were seeing moves and things that you've never seen. So I would say there were nights that I was absolutely terrified about the thought of going on television and saying something stupid, which is, if you watch the show, that's not out of the realm of possibility. But more importantly, maybe saying something that's going to be inaccurate or might hurt people. So yeah. It was definitely, in looking back, those were some hairy shows. And what's really, I haven't done it in a long time, but they used to give us a disc, a DVD. I know it sounds crazy in today's world, but of each night's show. So up in my closet somewhere, I have literally hundreds of DVDs of the early shows, and it should be fun to go back and watch during the height of the financial crisis. But, it was scary. We navigated it pretty well, and I tell you, the audience that we garnered during that time was never seen before on CNBC. Obviously, the world's changed significantly. In terms of some of the correlations and some of the things that seem the same today, a lot of it's playing out. You obviously saw what happened with Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank or some of the news over the weekend. That's hauntingly familiar. Difference now is, I think, things happen much faster. 08, 09 took time. I think if, in today's world, what happened in 08 and 09 would happen in months, not, a year and a half or so. So I think time is just sped up. I think things tend to work their way through the system a lot faster. And listen, we're seeing it real time right now. You've seen the moves in the markets over the last couple of weeks, the last 2 days notwithstanding.
Absolutely. And do you attribute any of this to social media? Because, you've been in the media industry for a while, and you've kind of seen social media take form and kind of just make a really big impact. Sometimes what you tweet could have more impact than what you say on your show. So
No question. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we're in this now 24/7 news cycle, not only on digital news, on cable news, but on our phones, right? I mean, you have access to everything real time, every minute of every day. So clearly social media is a huge input here. And, the old chat rooms or coffee, water cooler chat that you used to have at the desk, I mean, that's replaced by these chat rooms, the Reddit and Wall Street Bets. I mean, nothing's changed other than the distribution mechanism, right? So the world is the same. It's just the speed with which things happen has changed, and the amount of people you can reach obviously has changed.
Absolutely. And I think, there, of course, is the rise of Bitcoin and that having obviously huge online presence because it's the currency of the internet now. And, how do you feel about, Bitcoin cryptocurrency kind of coming up in, the financial world where now the government's kind of questioning the whole financial system because of Bitcoin, a digital currency?
Yeah, I'm not going to patronize you at all. I mean, I think but I'll say this, you've probably forgotten more about crypto than I know. And I say that with 100% certainty. But I'll say this, and I'm pretty confident, at least in my opinion, that I'm right. I think Bitcoin was born out of what happened in 08, 09, and I think it was born out of a fear that central banks were sort of taking over and this concern that fiat currencies were going to be sort of the downfall to a certain extent of not civilization, but capitalism as we know it. That's why I think crypto was born out of. And let's just continue down. So I don't think it's coincidental that as Bitcoin started to really go into a meteoric rise, as central banks became more and more accommodative, I don't think that's coincidence. I also don't think it's coincidence that if you overlay a chart of when Bitcoin topped out and when our Federal Reserve pivoted in November, I mean, literally to the minute, the two go hand in hand, right? So Bitcoin topped out just as this Fed pivoted. And listen, each time the Fed gets more and more hawkish, that's the next leg lower you see in Bitcoin. I don't think that's coincidental, and it makes perfect sense to me. I think the next leg higher in Bitcoin will be when our Federal Reserve flinches. Now, I'll say this. I was really surprised last week when you got the news out of the Bank of England. If you had told me that was going to happen a day or so prior and said, okay, what's gold going to do? What's Bitcoin going to do? I say, gold's going to go up $100 on that news. That didn't happen. And Bitcoin was going to go up to 25,000. That didn't happen. So it's interesting to see, but maybe it's just they're not taking the BOE all that seriously. But if our Federal Reserve were to flinch, pivot, whatever bullshit word you want to use, I think that could be the next leg higher in Bitcoin. So that's what I'm sort of on the lookout for, and we'll see how it plays itself out.
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of stigma in the stock market about, Bitcoiners, crypto people. And there's also maybe a little stigma on our side, too, in the crypto side, where we have a little stigma against the stock people. Honestly, I don't care. I think everyone, it's a free market either way. Invest in what you want to invest, whatever makes you happy. But do you think that the Bitcoin world and the Wall Street world can coexist?
The answer is yes. I think they've been coexisting for quite some time. I mean, if you watch our show, which you clearly do,
of course,
I'm never disrespectful of anybody. As a matter of fact, I was pointing out early on that some of the people in the Reddit rooms, the Wall Street Bets crowd, I mean, they knew more about negative gamma and volatility and convexity and those things than people that would get paid to do it. So some of those moves you saw in some of those meme stocks were not coincidental, and I think that was really smart people taking advantage of really arrogant people. So I'm not dismissive of anybody. I think the two worlds absolutely are I don't know if they've collectively gotten together, but they can definitely exist in parallel universes or just parallel feeds, right? And I think that's what's going on right now. As old dinosaurs like me, sort of age out, it's just a matter of time before the whole universe becomes one. And I think that's what we're on the verge of now.
I don't see why not. I don't know why there's so much stigma either way. I think, there's obviously blood in the streets right now. There's red markets in crypto. There's red markets in the stock market. Do you think we're going to get out of this soon? Do you think, we're going to have greener days ahead?
Yeah. Well, look, I think this sell-off in the stock market, again, the last 2 days notwithstanding, is long overdue. And if you watch the show, which again you do, we've been talking about this since November, December, that if the old adage, and David Tepper talks about this all the time, and it's frustrating that he makes it so simple, but it really is simple at a certain point. He would say when the Fed was accommodative, listen, if the Fed's adding liquidity, if they're keeping rates low, if you're bearish in that environment, you are fighting the Fed. And you know what? He was right. But the same should hold true that if you're bullish in an environment where the Fed is taking away liquidity and raising rates, you're effectively fighting the Fed. So if your overall bullish thesis right now, you're doing the same thing the bears were doing a few years ago. But to answer your question, I think the market's just finding what real value is, right? Price discovery is painful. And in a world of zero interest rates and, liquidity that we've never seen before, there's no price discovery. You can't have transparency because everything is opaque. Now we're taking some of that out of the system and we're learning where things should be. And I think that's why you're seeing this unparalleled volatility in the bond market that now people are starting to talk about. And we've been talking about it forever. And you're seeing it in the currency markets as well. Yeah. So on the road to discovery, there are a lot of potholes. And I think that's what you're dealing with right now.
Absolutely. It's a little scary, especially as a teen looking at these markets over the past few years. It's been a wild ride. Now, how do you, if you're 19 again, Guy, and because I know you got to go soon, so I want to give you a few more questions I had in my brain here. If you went back to 19-year-old Guy Adami entering these markets, what would you tell yourself? What would be the advice to yourself?
I love that question. Here's the advice. And I wish somebody had told me this then, but you don't think of investing. You obviously do, but you're definitely a minority. And I think more and more people are coming to that realization. But, when I was 19 and whatever it was, 1982 or something, the last thing I was thinking about was investing in stocks, investing in alternative assets, investing in real estate, any of those things. If somebody had told me, and this is, I'm not casting aspersions here, but if somebody had pulled me aside and said, look, instead of doing whatever you're going to do, if you put away X amount of money a month and invest, by age whatever, you're going to have X in front of you just doing the math. So if I can impart any wisdom on anybody your age that's listening, don't be afraid of the markets. And there's never the right time, but you have to start somewhere. And I think, first of all, you'll be shocked at how quickly time goes by. I think you'll be really shocked at how quickly that nest egg can grow if you just invest and just stay with it. And again, it really comes down to staying with it. So I wish I had known that then. I obviously know it now. It's not going to help me, but hopefully it can help some of your viewers and listeners.
Absolutely. I think this was a really great discussion. I think it solidifies a lot of people just being that are really unsure right now. I think everybody's really stressed about what's going on in these markets, and we all just have to take a deep breath and calm down a little bit, go outside, touch some grass, eat a burrito. You like burritos, don't you, Guy?
CMG, my favorite place. You know it. You sort of led me down that road, but I'm a huge fan. As a matter of fact, Chipotle sent me a T-shirt with my order on it. Chicken burrito, extra chicken, no beans, white rice, salsa, sour cream and cheese. So yes.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Guys, go outside, touch some grass, and grab a burrito. Guy, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can everybody find you? And do you have any more last words? It could be about the markets. It could be about going outside. It could be about burritos. It could be about anything that is in your heart. What would you like to share with the audience today?
Appreciate that. Don't get bogged down. We all focus on the negative all the time. I am guilty of that as well, but there's so many positive things out there. So it's just all... I happen to think that happiness is a choice, right? And I know that sounds crazy, and I'm not speaking to people that obviously have medical issues, but choose to be happy, choose to look at sort of the good things that can happen. I am definitely a half-empty person in terms of the markets and stuff, and I'm guilty of that, but, try to look at life a little bit differently. And for all the shit that goes on out there, there's a lot of good going on as well. Try to find that. And I really appreciate you having me on. And I'll say this, I think it's great what you're doing. I really am. I know the hard work you put in. I know how difficult it is to create a name for yourself when you're vying with so many different people in the space, but you managed to do it, and that's a tribute to you. So thanks for having me.
It means so much. Thank you so much, Guy. I really appreciate you. I hope to have you back one day. Maybe we got to do it like a roundtable, me, you, and Dan, because it's so spicy. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. A lot of great people in the audience. Guys, I'm going to have 3 shows this week total. So tomorrow we will be back at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. I hope everybody has a great day. And wait, make sure you like. Guys, if you are watching right now and you didn't like this video, I'm going to be upset with you. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and share the stream out with friends if you had a good time, especially if you had a good time. Comment after this video is over. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Have a great day, everyone. And as always, stay zesty. Peace.
Good morning, crypto Twitter, it's Misty Crypto, spreading crypto adoption, showing its benefits to my generation.